Tonight I've got a tale to share from way back to the end of the Civil War, a time when my family ventured from Georgia to the wilds of Texas. My folks, neither rich nor poor, found themselves in the struggles of poverty, renting a small place in Georgia. But what set us apart was our foreign roots, my Scotch mother and my North Irish father. The war brought me my initiation as a cowboy, of which I have now, after the long lapse of years, the greater portion of which were spent with cattle, a distinct recollection. Sherman's army, in its march to the sea, passed through our county, devastating that section for miles in its passing. Foraging parties scoured the country on either side of its path. My mother had warning in time and set her house in order. Our work stock consisted of 2 yoke of oxen, while our cattle numbered 3 cows, and for saving them from the foragers credit must be given to my mother's generalship. There was a wild canebrake in which the cattle fed, several hundred acres in extent, about a mile from our little farm, and it was necessary to bell them in order to locate them when wanted. But the cows were in the habit of coming up to be milked, and a soldier can hear a bell as well as anyone. I was a lad of 8 at the time, and while my 2 older brothers worked our few fields, I was sent into the canebrake to herd the cattle. We had removed the bells from the oxen and cows, but one ox was belled after darkness each evening, to be unbelled again at daybreak. I always carried the bell with me, stuffed with grass, in order to have it at hand when wanted. During the first few days of the raid, a number of mounted foraging parties passed our house, but its poverty was all too apparent, and nothing was molested. Several of these parties were driving herds of cattle and work stock of every description, while by day and by night gins and plantation houses were being given to the flames. Our one-room log cabin was spared, due to the ingenious tale told by my mother as to the whereabouts of my father. And yet she taught her children to fear God and tell the truth. My vigil was trying to one of my years, for the days seemed like weeks, but the importance of hiding our cattle was thoroughly impressed upon my mind. Food was secretly brought to me, and under cover of darkness my mother and eldest brother would come and milk the cows, when we would all return home together. Then, before daybreak, we would be in the cane listening for the first tinkle, to find the cattle and remove the bell, and my day's work commenced anew. Only once did I come near betraying my trust. About the middle of the 3rd day I grew very hungry, and as the cattle were lying down, I crept to the edge of the canebrake to see if my dinner was not forthcoming. Soldiers were in sight, which explained everything. Concealed in the rank cane, I stood and watched them. Suddenly a squad of 5 or 6 turned a point of the brake and rode within 50 feet of me. I stood like a stone statue, my concealment being perfect. After they had passed, I took a step forward, the better to watch them as they rode away, when the grass dropped out of the bell and it clattered. A red-whiskered soldier heard the tinkle, and wheeling his horse, rode back. I grasped the clapper and lay flat on the ground, my heart beating like a trip hammer. He rode within 20 feet of me, peering into the thicket of cane, and not seeing anything unusual, turned and galloped away after his companions. Then the lesson, taught me by my mother, of being faithful over a few things, flashed through my mind, and though our cattle were spared to us, I felt very guilty. Though we had lost nothing by the war, Dad was impatient to go to a new country. Many of his former comrades were going to Texas, and as our worldly possessions were movable, to Texas we started. Our 4 oxen were yoked to a worn-out wagon, which creaked under the weight of our few worldly possessions, while our 4 oxen, loyal but tired, yoked and pulled. Mother and the little ones squeezed into the wagon, the elder boys trailing behind with the cows and dogs creating a ragtag caravan. The wheels of our wagon turned, grinding through dirt and uncertainty, as we embarked on an entire summer's journey. Incident, privation, and hardship became our companions, testing the resilience of our spirits. The stock fared well, but our larder was a constant concern, forcing us to halt, work, and secure provisions along the way. Through certain sections, however, fish and game were abundant. I remember the enthusiasm we all felt when we reached the Sabine River and for the first time viewed the Promised Land. It was at a ferry, and the sluggish river was deep. When my father informed the ferryman that he had no money with which to pay the ferriage, the latter turned on him, remarking sarcastically, "What, no money? My dear sir, it certainly can't make much difference to a man which side of the river he's on when he has no money." Nothing daunted by this rebuff, my father argued the point at some length, when the ferryman relented so far as to inform him that 10 miles higher up the river was fordable. We arrived at the ford the next day. My father rode across and back, testing the stage of the water and the river's bottom before driving the wagon in, then taking one of the older boys behind him on the mule in order to lighten the wagon. He drove the oxen into the river. Near the middle, the water was deep enough to reach the wagon box, but with shoutings and a free application of the gad, we hurried through in safety. One of the wheel oxen, a black steer which we called Popeye, could be ridden, and I straddled him in fording, laving my sunburned feet in the cool water. The cows were driven over next, the dogs swimming, and at last, bag and baggage, we were in Texas. Texas greeted us with open arms, and we settled by the San Antonio River. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was happy. Yet the lure of the range and a horse's saddle proved too strong for me. Despite my father's efforts to keep me home, I found my way to the open plains.